Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Islamic or Sharia law, session 6. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Justice. To establish the rule of justice is a basic responsibility of an Islamic state. The demand for justice prevails in all walks of life, but there we shall talk only about the judicial justice, that which pertains to the domain of law. The Quran also provides the required guidance for justice dispensing agencies, that is, the courts of law. It is necessary to understand one basic principle about justice. According to the common concept of justice in the world, the duty of a law court is to decide the disputed affairs according to the code of law that is prevalent. Therefore, a decision made accordingly shall be considered as based on justice. But if the law itself is not based on justice, then the decision based on it can never be considered just. Thus, the principle laid down by the Quran is that law of the land should also be based on justice. In this respect, the Quran does not indulge in philosophical debate as to what is meant by law on the basis of justice and what is the definition of justice. It addresses the Islamic sovereign state decisively as follows. Ayah 5-44. If any do fail to judge by what Allah has revealed, they are the infidels. It means that where the rule is based on Quranic laws, it shall be an Islamic government, and if it is not based on Quranic law, it shall be a government of non believers. Only that law shall be considered as based on truth, which conforms to the book of Allah. Any law contrary to it shall be based on zulm, that is injustice. Thus, the judges are addressed as follows in Ayah 7-158. They guide people towards the truth, that is the Quran, and dispense justice in accordance with what it dictates. The real justice, in fact, is the justice based on truth. If the law is not based on truth, then any judgment according to this law cannot be considered as meeting the requirement of justice. Truth is, in fact, another name for the book of Allah. The same is the difference between any Islamic state and a secular state. In Surah Sad, it is said in Ayah 38-26, O David, we did indeed give you the rule on the earth. So decide between men in truth and do not follow the lust of their hearts, for they will mislead you from the path of Allah. It makes clear two issues. Firstly, that law of the land ought to be based on truth, that is the book of Allah. Secondly, that the court of law should remain above its personal sentiments, that it should remain neutral. That is what is called a just decision. Para 2. For a system of justice, the Quran has ordained in Ayah 4-58, and when you decide between man and man, you must do so with justice. Even when you make peace between parties, do so with justice. In Ayah 49-9, in Surah Al-Hujurat, it is ordained that the two factions of Muslims develop a dispute, that is, they wage war against each other, sort out its mutual conflict with justice. Para 3. Even enmity with a nation should not incline you to act unjustly. Ayah 5-8 says, let not the enmity of others make you swerve for justice. Be just, that is only nearer to taqwa, piety. Para 4. Not only the cases of Muslims, but the cases of non-Muslims also should be decided with justice. The Rasul was ordained. Even if the non-Muslims come to you for the judgment of their cases, as in Ayah 5-42, judge between them with equity. The Rasul was told, we have sent this book to you with the truth, as said in Ayah 5-48, so judge between them as Allah has revealed and follow not their vain desires. Para 6. Al-Kitab, the code of divine laws. Power to enforce this code and scales of justice are the basic ingredients of an Islamic government, as stated earlier. The various aspects of the subject are thoroughly discussed in Surah Al-Hadid, as said in Ayah 57-25. For this purpose, Allah has so arranged that He sends His messengers to different people, that is, nations, with clear, unambiguous arguments, and each one of the messengers bring with him a code of law. He establishes an order in accordance with this code, wherein everybody's deeds produce their designated results, and thus people adhere to the rule of justice and equity. For the stability and strength of such a society, we have sent along with the code of laws steel, that is to provide the enforcing power, in which there is much of stiffness, that is strength, because power provided by the strength of this steel becomes instrumental in establishing an order based on justice and equity and providing protection to the oppressed. Therefore, instead of being harmful, it becomes greatly beneficial to mankind. The establishment of this order also brings into open those faithful and loyal persons who contribute towards achieving this goal, that is, establishment of the order, which takes practical shape through the efforts of Allah's messengers. Although the refulgent results of the establishment of this order have not as yet become visible, these faithful and loyal people, on the strength of their conviction only, offer every type of personal sacrifice and thus establish the system ordained by Allah, wherein lies inherent power and sovereignty. Para 7. During the course of injustice, during the course of justice, do not make any distinction between relatives and non-relatives, or between your people and those of the other factions. Neither the status of rich and poor, nor even your personal benefits should affect your judgment. The judgment must be based on justice, even if it goes against yourself. Thus it is ordained in Ayah 6-153, when you say something, say it according to justice, even if the concerned person is your relative. Justice depends on evidence, and for evidence, the Holy Quran has set up such a light standard, the like of which you may not find elsewhere. Thus, it is said in Ayah 4-135, in order to establish this system in which you find pleasures of the present life as well as of the future, the basic condition for justice is that you stand as a witness, neither from the plaintiff nor defendant, but present your own evidence in all truth and equity, even if it goes against yourself or your parents or your relatives. Do not differentiate between rich and poor in this respect, for Allah can best protect both. So much so that you must do justice even to your enemy, as said in Ayah 5-8. Do not favor anyone after swerving from what is just, as Allah Almighty Himself takes care of them. Keep it in your mind that your sentiments may not come in the way of justice. Do not talk in a crooked manner, nor try to avoid being a witness. Remember that Allah's law of equital is well acquainted with what you do. He knows the inclination of your mind as well as your sentiments. Para 8. As said earlier, Allah ordains both adl and ihsan. as said in Ayah 7-20 and 16-90. To punish the criminal for his crime is adl, that is justice, and make good the loss of the claimant is ihsan. This is the basic responsibility of an Islamic state. Basic orders about the enforcement of justice. Number one, to punish the criminal according to law is the duty of the government. This is called Kissas. In this lies the secret of the life of the people. There shall be no distinction between small or big. Thus it is said in Ayah 2-178, O you who believe, as regards punishment, it has been made incumbent upon you that the murderer must be punished. It means that the crime should be considered as a crime against society or against the system itself, and not against the victim only. Thus, while giving punishment, the basic principles of the justice and equality must be kept in mind, which means that there should be no distinction between big and small. It is not a question of the position of the murderer or the murdered. The real question is the enforcement of justice, according to which every human life is of equal value. For example, if the murderer is a free man, he alone shall be punished for his crime. Likewise, if she is a woman, she shall not be spared because of her sex. She will have to undergo punishment. Murder can be of two types: murder by intent or murder by mistake. In the case of willful murder, the punishment is death, that is not ransom money, or any other punishment proportionate to the nature of the crime, that is any less than the capital punishment, as said in Ayah 4-93. But the punishment should not exceed the nature of the crime, as said in Ayah 42-40 and 17-33. But if it is not a willful murder but a murder by mistake, the punishment according to verse 4-92 is ransom money, that is blood money. But if a remission is made by the heirs of the slain out of their own goodwill, they are allowed to do so, as said in 17-33. In such a case, it is incumbent on the murderer to abide by what has been settled and pay it in a commendable manner. In determining the punishment of murder by mistake, Allah has provided facility for relaxation so that the potentialities of all of you may keep developing. But if anybody transgresses after the settlement has taken place, he shall be punished heavily. Thus, it is clear that a compromise can take place only in case of unintentional murder, not in willful murder. In willful murder, the murderer shall be punished. This is the law of Qisas, about which it has been ordained. In Ayah 2-179, O you men of understanding, in the law of Qisas, that is retribution, there is saving of collective life to you. It means that if you think over it dispassionately, the reality shall come to the surface. That is the law of Qisas, that is retribution. There is a secret of individual as well as collective life, so that society can be saved from the dangers inherent in lawlessness. Para 2. Only the criminal and not any other person in his place shall receive punishment, nor shall any innocent person be prosecuted in place of guilty person. Everybody shall bear his own burden. As said in Ayah 6-165, every person draws the meed of his acts on none but himself. No bearer of burden shall bear the burden of another. Para 3. The system of justice ought to be such that nobody might provide any benefit to the criminal, nor the recommendation of any person be accepted, nor the criminal be released through bribery, nor anybody could help him to escape punishment by any other means. Thus it is said in Ayah 2-48, then guard yourself against a day when one person shall not avail of another, nor shall be intercession be accepted for any person, nor any compensation be taken from somebody, nor shall anybody be helped against the law. This will happen when the Quranic system of justice is established in this world and in the life. Hereafter, after affairs shall be settled subject to law of requital. Para 4. The punishment of a criminal shall be proportionate to and not exceed his crime. In this respect, the principle is, as said in Ayah 42-40, the recompense of an evil is punishment like it. This is this has been explained further in Ayahs 2-194, 10-27, 16-126, 22-60, 40-40. Para 5. If there exists possibility of mending oneself, he can be forgiven, as said in Ayah 42-40. But if a person forgives and makes reconciliation, his reward is due from Allah. Para 6. Before an offense is proved, the accused ought to be considered innocent. Thus, during investigation, he should not be treated with excess. To consider him guilty at this stage is against the Islamic code. In Surah An-Nur, there is a tale about a woman during the time of Rasul. It is said that some evil monger brought about a false accusation against a virtuous woman and gave it publicity. The Quran took strong notice of it and said, evil mongers had given publicity to a false accusation, but what has happened to you that you accepted it as true without any investigation? When you had heard about it, you ought to have a favorable opinion about her, and your first reaction ought to have been, as said in Ayah 24-12, it is an obvious lie. That is, this is an obvious lie, and as said in Ayah 24-16, this is most serious slander. From this, the principle is deduced that unless a crime is proved against a person, he should not be considered guilty. That is, an accused should not be considered a criminal, but a favorable opinion should be formed against him until such time that he is proved guilty. When a legislation is passed, none shall be held accountable for what has done before its enactment, as said in Ayah 4-23. What has been done before the enactment of a law shall not be dealt with in accordance with the law. Also see Ayah 2-275 and 5-95. Para 8. Only a willful act shall be considered a crime. Thus it is said in Ayah 33-5, there is no blame on you if you make a mistake. What counts in the intention of your hearts. That is, only an act committed intentionally is accountable. If someone commits an offense on account of ignorance and therefore repents and amends his conduct, he can be excused for it, as said in Ayah 6-54. But that does not mean that people may become careless about the law. Carelessness itself should be considered a separate offense. For example, the punishment for willful murder is death, and the punishment for murder by mistake is ransom money, as said in Ayah 4-92 and 93. It means that carelessness is also a crime, but not as serious as a willful act. Para 9. If one is forcibly made to commit a crime, he shall not be considered a criminal, as said in Ayah 16-106. The use of force may be of varied types. However, this is not the place of giving details about them. Para 10. A small mistake by those who always avoid big crimes may be considered excusable. About Mu'mineen, it is said as in Ayah 53-32. These are the people who avoid major crimes, though they may fall into small slips. Para 11. Anybody who puts another on the wrong path, he becomes a partner in crime. About such people, it is said in Ayah 16-25, let them bear on the day of judgment their own burden in full, and also something of the burdens of those without knowledge, whom they misled. Alas, how grievous are the burdens they will bear. Likewise is the one who commits a crime and throws it on another. He commits a double crime. Ayah 4-112. And if anyone commits a mistake or a crime himself and then foists it on the innocent, he carries on himself both the burden of a calumny and a flagrant sin. Para 12. While declaring a judgment, the circumstances, upbringing, mentality, and psychological condition of the criminal must be kept in mind. That is why the punishment for a slave woman who commits adultery, that is zina, is laid down as half of that for a free woman, as said in Ayah 4-25, the double for the consorts of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as said in Ayah 33-30. It should be clearly understood that this commandment pertains to that period of Arab history when slavery was still rampant. Since the Quran closed the door of the slavery, the question of the captive women or of the consorts of Rasul does not arise. However, principles can be deduced from such verses which could be applied to present day society. Para 13. Remove evil by doing good. It means to create such an atmosphere in society that people shall avoid crime automatically. As said in Ayah 28-54, 23-96, and 11-114, is a universal principle of Quran. It means that bad deeds ought to be countervailed by doing good. This principle serves as a means to bring about a pleasant and comprehensive resolution. Thus, while declaring punishment for a crime, the prevailing conditions in the society are to be kept in mind. Para 14. The object of the justice is not only to punish the offender but also to compensate the loss of the oppressed. In this connection, the example of the crime of murder as laid down in Quran can be presented. The one who is murdered leaves this world, but the compensation for loss that his hears suffer is also necessary. Thus it is said in Ayah 17-33, if anyone is slain wrongfully, we have given his hearers the right to demand Kissas, or to forgive. From this example, you can draw a principle which can be applied to other occurrences like this. As far as the compensation of the loss of the oppressed is concerned, the oppressed shall be the plaintiff and the government shall be the defendant in such a case. Thus, it shall be incumbent upon the government to protect the life, property, honor of all who live with its territory. Moreover, except for the loss suffered by a person on account of his own neglect or the carelessness, its compensation shall lie on the government, and this loss includes not only life and property but also mental torture, because the government guarantees to the people to provide for them an atmosphere wherein, as said in Ayah 2-38, on them there shall be no fear, and nor shall they grieve. In fear, the physical loss is included, and in grief, mental torture is included. Para 15. The government shall be answerable to the judiciary for each of its responsibilities. Like other individuals, even the Rasul, who was the first head of its Islamic State, was made to declare, as in Ayah 6-14, I am the first to submit to divine law, and if I disobey divine command, I indeed fear the penalty of the mighty day. Therefore, none is exempt from this law, neither the government nor its functionaries, nor even the head of the state. Para 16. The Quranic philosophy concerning crime is as under: A. Every crime leaves an effect on the offender himself as well, so that, to begin with, the offender inflicts injury on his own person, as in Ayah 4-111, 111. If anybody earns a sin, he earns his own self. It means that the first effect of committing wrong is on the personality of the offender, and this effect cannot be erased by punishment from the court. B. The effect of some offense is limited to the personality of the offender. It does not affect another person. For example, the treachery of the eyes and evil intentions of the heart, as said in Ayah 40-19. These offenses do not normally come under the jurisdiction of the courts of law. Yet, even such offenses which affect only the personality of the offender, for example, addiction to narcotics, if declared as a crime by law, shall come under the jurisdiction of the court. C. Only those offences come under the jurisdiction of the court which the offender has actually committed. For example, if one intends to commit theft but does not find an opportunity to do it, although the effect of his intention shall be imprinted on his own itself, he shall not be considered as an offender in the eyes of the law. Quran says that Allah's law of requital takes account of even the ideas that pass in your mind. It means that such a person shall not be an offender in the eyes of the law court, yet he shall be an offender according to Allah's law of requital. That is why the Quran lays stress on the reformation of human ideas and intentions. If the intentions are rectified, the crimes cannot occur. Thus, it is the duty of an Islamic state to give wide publicity to educate its citizens on the philosophy of crime, so that the individuals of the society begin to comprehend the eventual loss for the wrongdoing and the violation of the law. Verses 4-107 to 112 are an eye opener and provide effective guidance for eradication of crimes from the society. As a matter of fact, Iman on Allah's law of requital and the life hereafter, substantiated by reason and argument, is a great rectifying force. Para 17. In matters relating to punishment, it ought to be kept in mind that the punishments prescribed by the Holy Quran itself are the maximum punishments and were proposed according to the socio-economic conditions that prevailed during the day of its revelation. These punishments shall be ordered only under similar conditions. If the conditions change, an Islamic rule can make changes in them. An example of it is found in Quran itself. The punishment for revolt against the Islamic law is beheading or crucifixion, cutting off hands and feet, or banishment of or detention. That is Ayah 5-33. The object of prescribing a number of punishments is these should be enforced according to the prevalent conditions. These punishments are neither abrogate nor can be annulled, but these are conditions to the prevailing circumstances. On the other hand, the Islamic government itself shall determine punishment that have not been prescribed by the Quran. The Islamic government shall also decide as to which of the social laws can be included in the list of the penal laws. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session number 6 on Islamic law ends here. Let's pray together that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the wisdom and courage to learn Quran and Islamic and Sharia law, and He gives us that strength to apply this law upon us, upon our environment, upon the countries, upon all the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be our best protector and guide, and He bestows upon us and He grants us whatever is best suited for us. Ladies and gentlemen, please take care of yourselves, your nears and dears, kith and kins, your complete environment as a whole. Till next session, Allah Hafiz.